Right. Hello everyone, I'm Marina and I'm from an organization called Sisters in Islam, which you may have heard of, but there may be gaps in what you know about us and what we do. So I'm going to talk to you today about filling in the justice gap, interpreting for equality. Now, Sisters in Islam is an organization that fights for justice and equality for Muslim women, and we do it through the religion. We call ourselves Islamic feminists because we see no incompatibility between feminism and Islam. And we work through the text, the holy text, because we believe that it is filled with calls for justice, calls for equality for women. And this is just one of the very, very many verses in the Quran that tells us to work together and that men and women are equal. So chapter 3, verse 195, as interpreted by Asad, translated by Asad, and thus does their sustainer answer their prayer, I shall not lose sight of the labor of any of you who labors in my way, be it man or woman. Each of you is an issue of the other. So we think it's very clear in the Quran, it says that men and women are equal. However, in real life, the lot of Muslim women isn't that good. In many, many countries, women have been discriminated against and are really suffering in very many ways. In much of the Muslim world, literacy rates are pretty low, but there is a big difference between the literacy rates of men and women. And women tend to be less educated, less able to read and write than men. In Pakistan, for example, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, only 50% of the men and 24%, less than a quarter of the women are literate. That means they can read and write. In Iran, in Bahrain, in many other countries, they have higher rates of literacy, but still, women are less literate than men. Maternal mortality rates, which means the rate where women die from giving birth, from pregnancy and giving birth, are also pretty high. And some of the worst countries are in Afghanistan, where you get 460 deaths per 100,000 live births, Mauritania in Africa, or in Pakistan. Life expectancies are also short in these countries, and women, although in most countries women live longer than men, in some of these countries it's not very long at all. In Afghanistan, they only live up to 50 years, which means if I was Afghan, I'd be dead by now. And the percentage of women in parliament, which is very important because this is where laws are made that affects everybody's lives. The percentage of women globally in parliaments is very low, 90% only. But in Muslim countries, it's even less, particularly in the Middle East, where there are hardly any women at all in parliament. So women's rights in Muslim context are defined by laws that are made from people's interpretations of what is in the Quran, what is in the Hadith. And this often affects our family laws, which means marriage, divorce, birth, inheritance, guardianship. And unfortunately, in many countries, women's rights in Muslim context aren't that respected, aren't that good. Some of the examples: age of marriage. Many countries have signed the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, including this country. But many have placed reservations, meaning they don't want to do it right now, they don't want to translate it into law, because they think that those clauses are related to Sharia and violate them. For instance, they will not raise the age of marriage to 18, which is what it says in CEDAW. In many countries, for example, ours, it is 16, but anyone younger can actually get married with permission from the court. And you might remember recently, there was a 12-year-old girl who was married off to a 19-year-old boy. 12 years old, that's much younger than my youngest daughter. Rights in marriage and divorce are also inherently biased towards men. Women don't have much rights. Not to say that they don't have rights in Islam, they don't have rights in the laws that some of these Muslim countries have. They cannot choose sometimes who they marry, sometimes they are married off without even knowing it. Men, of course, have the right to polygamy, and they often practice this without even telling their current wives. Reproductive rights, the right to decide decide when to. Years ago, when Islam came, it came to be established by the Prophet, peace be upon him, women were given a lot of rights. From a time when they were killed as babies, they gained many rights to choose their own husbands, for instance, to make their own contracts, write their own contracts. They could own property. They had the right to divorce, and they could even choose not to agree to polygamy. And one example is the Prophet's own daughter Fatima, who did not want her husband to take on another wife, and the Prophet agreed that she could get a divorce, or he stopped his son-in-law from taking another wife. Today, you can't quite imagine that happening. They could be witness in courts, and although many people have said that, oh, women's witness in court is only half that of men, that means you need 2 women for every man. In fact, the reason for this was that many of the cases that went to court was actually about business, and because women didn't have enough experience in business, they were allowed to bring someone along so that they could confer with them whether they were giving the right evidence of this business. So it wasn't because they were half as smart as the guys, it was because they had less experience and they could invite someone else to come and help them with witnessing. They could definitely run their own businesses. And the prime example is Khadija, who was the first wife of the Prophet, who was older than him, who was his boss, and who, in fact, patriarchal interpretations of the Quran, that means interpretations done by men, seen through their eyes, and unfortunately always advantageous to them. There have been many customs and traditions which have favored men in countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan, where things like honor killings you might have heard about, where girls are not allowed to choose who they want to marry, and if they do that, then the family gets very upset and sometimes even kills them. And many of these laws have been really 40 or so of these women through the years by looking at all sorts of documents and tracing history and everything. And he found, in fact, that there are more than 8,000 of them. Most of whom we do not know, and most of whom have been forgotten completely in the realms of history, or been taken over. But nowadays, we only think of Islamic scholars as men, and we don't realize that, in fact, women have been contributing from the very beginning. Starting with women like Aisha, who was the youngest daughter of the Prophet, peace be upon him, who narrated the tradition detailing the circumstances of the first revelation. The first revelation was to read. She, of course, as his wife, he told her what happened, and so she knew that, and she could transmit that to other people and tell them what exactly he told her. There was Rubiah bin Ibn Afra, who narrated how the Prophet performed his absolutions, absolutions before prayer, because she saw him do it. And therefore she was a very authentic transmitter of that. And that's how we all know how to do it since. There were other women who were jurists, who were muftis. You can't imagine a woman mufti today, and who were hadith specialists. They taught in the Grand Mosque in Damascus, for instance. They taught people of the hadith traditions, and they even taught other scholars, male scholars. During this time, during the 1400, during the 6th, 7th, 8th centuries, etc., it was nothing strange to go and learn from a woman, even if you were a great scholar yourself. And their words counted, their opinions counted, their knowledge was held in high esteem during that time. And this is something very interesting, because their contributions were in fact so respected because they were known to be faithful to the truth. They were faithful to the authenticity of the hadith. And according to Dr. Muhammad Akram, he said there was no single hadith which has been rejected from a woman on account of her being a fabricating liar. Imam Dahabi, who is a well-known imam, said there are many men who have fabricated hadith. And this is a big problem because we don't know whether all, there were some hadiths which are not authentic at all. However, no woman in the history of Islam has been accused of fabrication. And in light of this, if the intellectual integrity of anyone should be questioned, it should be that of men. Women have always truthfully conveyed religious knowledge. So, with this type of history, why should women, the new Egyptian constitution, which has just been being passed right now in Egypt, removed the clause stating that men and women are equal. This is hardly what the Arab Spring, the Arab Revolution was hoping for, unfortunately. This is with the type of people now in their parliament. There are only 4 women in the entire parliament, and this is what happens. They remove the clause that says men and women are equal. Women are often deprived of rights in family laws and can be married, divorced, entered into polygamous arrangements unwillingly and sometimes unknowingly, and unfortunately that sort of thing also happens here in Malaysia. We get a lot of women who find out that their husband has another wife or wives only when he dies. And you all know the stories. And men's interpretations of the Quran unfortunately have disfavored women, even though the Quran itself does not discriminate against women. So, how do we overcome this? We read for ourselves. We read the religious text for ourselves as a strategic approach to equality. Because as I said, the text does support equality. So, we are reclaiming the space. Modern women scholars are returning to the holy text and reinterpreting for themselves and finding much that is liberating for women in the Quran. The scholars include people like Fatima Manisi, Amina Wadud, Rifat Hassan, Ziba Mir Hussaini, and they have developed the concept of Islamic feminism, where Islam and feminism are seen as compatible because both fight for justice and equality for women. And organizations like Mine Sisters in Islam, we are applying what these women are finding out and teaching us to press for changes in laws and policies based on the lived realities of women, the real lives of women, not something that we imagine they should be living, but the everyday lives of our mothers, our sisters, our friends who are suffering because of laws that discriminate against them, because of biases in the courts, etc. Following that, Sisters has initiated a new movement called Musawa, which is Arabic for equality, which is a global movement for justice and equality in the Muslim family, where we seek to advocate for Muslim family laws that treat men and women equally, as it does in the Quran, through groundbreaking research and producing new knowledge. We are linked up with many similar women's organizations around the world. We are fighting for the rights of women through the religion, and we see no incompatibility with ideas of human rights and equal rights for women. So, sisters, what we're doing, we're reading the holy text, the Quran and the Hadith for ourselves to see what we've been led to believe was true, what people have been telling us all this time, what the men have been telling us all this time. And one of the great examples is the whole verse on polygamy, where it's been emphasized that men can have 4 wives. We went to read it ourselves and found out it's about orphans and widows. On top of that, the line after the bit about how you can take 2 or 3 or 4 wives says, and if you believe that you may not be fair to more than 1 wife, then the best is only 1. Yes. Wasn't that a revelation? Isn't that a liberating revelation? Now, we found out that the Quran addresses both men and women, gives both rights and responsibilities, and does not differentiate between the two. Even if you read it everywhere, it says men and women, men and women, men and women. But women are also treated as special, and we have a whole chapter, An-Nisa, which is about women. An-Nisa means women. There's even one chapter on Maryam, who is the mother of the Prophet Isa, or Mary. Jesus. Musawa, the global movement, calls for equality, non-discrimination, justice, and dignity as the basis of all human relations. How we should relate to one another as men and women, as people of different faiths, different ages, different classes, etc., should be one of equality, non-discrimination, justice, and dignity. There should be full and equal citizenship for every individual, especially men and women, and marriage and family relations should be based on equality and justice, with men and women sharing equal rights and responsibilities. And we could have different responsibilities, but it doesn't mean that one is less than the other. And we know we are on the right track because Sisters is now well recognized around the world for our pioneering work, and we've inspired similar organizations in other countries. Indonesia, for instance, the women activists there have all credited us with starting them on the road to this. We've been awarded several awards from many countries. Last year, we got an award from Spain for our human rights work. We work on real issues facing women and children, and this is gaining attention. For example, children conceived outside marriage in this country, for instance. A child born less than 6 months after his parents got married cannot take on the father's name. This is truly unjust. It means that the eldest child is considered illegitimate